was my turn to take my kids trick-or-treating. The previous year was my wife's, and we trade back and forth every year. My son and daughter are age 7 and 9. Usually I stay on the street while my kids go up to the different houses to collect candy. After about half an hour of walking around, we came to one of the more popular hotspots for candy collecting. A main street in the neighborhood. Lots of really cool decorations and animatronics on people's lawns. So I became a bit distracted and stopped watching my kids as closely. At one point, they came back from a house accompanied by another girl, about the same height as my daughter. She was wearing a weird homemade mask, like a cardboard cutout or something. My daughter asked me if she could trick-or-treat with us, so I said sure, and we carried on together as a group. I didn't know who this girl was, but I figured she was a friend from school. As we continued, I started to notice a large man trailing us. He was wearing some sort of angry cat mask. It was kind of creepy, to be honest. I thought that maybe he was the father of the girl, so I tried to start up some small chit-chat with him. I said something like, "Nice weather, huh?" But he didn't respond. He just stood there staring at me while our kids went up the stairs to the next house. I tried again, asking, "Hey, is that your daughter?" He nodded but didn't say a word. I figured he just wasn't in the mood for chatting, so I stopped trying. We carried on for about another 15 minutes until suddenly my kids came up to me and said they wanted to go home. This really surprised me as we hadn't been out for too long and their bags were only about a third full. In any case, I agreed, waved goodbye at the man in the cat mask and his daughter, and started on our way home. The weird thing is that when I glanced back, the man and his daughter were just standing there, staring at us. I checked one more time as we turned the corner and they were still standing there, not having moved at all. At this point, I decided to ask my kids, "So, who was that girl?" My daughter looked up at me with a confused look on her face. "She's your friend," my daughter replied. I asked her what she meant. Apparently, the girl with the cardboard mask approached them and said she was a friend of mine. She told my daughter she was too shy to ask me if she could join us to trick-or-treat and wanted my daughter to ask me instead. I laughed at this story and replied to my daughter, "Why would you think she was my friend? I don't have any children friends." What my daughter said next chilled my bones. According to her, when the girl with the cardboard mask approached them for the first time, she wasn't wearing the mask, so they were able to see her face. As it turns out, she wasn't a girl at all, but an older woman around my age, with wrinkles on her face. What's even more disturbing is that the old woman had started to steal treats from my daughter's bag, apparently when I wasn't looking. This is why they asked me to go home. The old woman was creeping them out, and they wanted to just get away from her. I brought my kids home and told my wife what had happened. We made sure to check through all their candy, but didn't find anything suspicious or off. We didn't call the police or anything, since nothing technically really happened, but thinking back, I kind of regret that decision now. What the heck was that old woman doing, and who the heck was that man following us around? I don't think I'll ever know. I just think it's sick that there are people out there on Halloween hiding behind masks, pretending to be children. Let me clarify. This happened during my college's Halloween celebration a few years ago and is the most terrifying experience of my life. One of my roommates, some friends and myself left to go to a party around dusk and were catcalled by a group of 3 drifters or homeless people. We thought nothing of it and went on our merry way. About 4 hours later, we're going back to our apartment to change shoes. High heels and messed up streets are hell when you've been drinking. When one of the drifters calls out to me, "Hey beautiful, how about a kiss?" Me being a little drunk and sassy, I reply, "No thanks, girls are more my type." To my shock and horror, he says, "Hey, my friend here likes the ladies." A homeless girl comes out of nowhere and proceeds to kiss me. My friend then picks me up and throws me over his shoulder. I proceed to flip the heck out of my apartment, shrug it off, and we venture back out. Well, I got separated from my group in the crowd and I see the 3 drifters again. I try not to show that I'm shitting bricks when they ask me where they can find a liquor store. I point them down the street to a Kroger and they say, "Okay, you can show us." I'm a small woman and they shoved me into their vehicle. I think naively at the time that they will literally let me out of the grocery store, except it's closed because it's after midnight. I plead for them to let me out of the car, but they keep saying, "The power does what it wants," and headed away from the safety of the campus area, onto the freeway and out of the state. For the next 4 hours, I visited 3 states with them while pleading for my life. I'll never forget how they kept saying, "The power does what it wants," and talking about how they're going to have fun with me. I kind of resigned myself to the fact that I was going to die, that I would never graduate college or see my family again. They pulled into a gas station and I slipped out of the vehicle to be grabbed again, but I screamed my head off for the clerk to help. That's when they talked about taking me to the cliff. I mentioned that my family is full of police officers and that they're probably already looking for me, how they're committing a federal crime, and that I won't press charges if they take me back to campus. I guess that's when the girl started to feel sorry for me because she started to say, "Guys, he's really scared. Maybe we should just drop her off somewhere. This doesn't have to get any worse." They took me back to the campus area, and as soon as the girl pulled me out of the car, a police officer called my name. The girl shoved me toward the cop and yelled, "The power does what it wants, and tonight I'll let you live." I've never been so happy to sit in a cruiser. They pursued them, but I don't know if they were ever caught. My roommate dropped out of college and joined the military, and I transferred to another school. So, ladies and gentlemen, please be careful walking at night. Always keep your cell phone with you if possible, and call the police if you see suspicious people near your apartment. I had a brush with death that day, and I'm just so grateful for the time I have now. This could have been written better, but it's still so hard to talk about. This happened when I was 12 and my brother was 17, and is truly proof that the living are more terrifying than the dead. I think about this every Halloween. This is not a paranormal story. The community I grew up in was made mostly of Hispanic people, so the folklore of La Llorona was very popular in the area and especially around Halloween. For those of you who don't know, the myth is basically a story about a woman who married a rich man, had a perfect life, and then the man cheated on her. She was so distraught that she took her children to the river and drowned them. After she died herself, but she couldn't pass on to the afterlife without her children, the myth is that she roams the river looking for her kids. If she spots living children, she will grab them and drown them to take them to the afterlife with her. The story is meant to keep kids from playing in the river. Most of my friends that year were too cool and grown up to go trick-or-treating that year, and were planning on having a party instead. I was really disappointed and asked if my brother would take me trick-or-treating. He agreed, and we went while it was still light outside so I'd be able to make it to the party before the end of the night. Since we had gone too early, there weren't a lot of people ready to hand out candy, so after a disappointing trek, we started walking back home. On our way home, we passed by a park that had a river running next to it. On Halloween, older teens would usually wait at this park to try to see if they could spot La Llorona. Waiting to spot her at this particular park was a well-known town tradition that people had done for decades, and that still continues to this day. However, there were no kids or teens there yet because it was still kind of early. But there were people in the park putting on a Llorona play. We decided to stop and watch it. There was not really much of an audience. It seems like it was just us and another few kids who were part of the group putting on the play, who were not in costumes and didn't even have trick-or-treating buckets with them. When we sat down, a woman approached us and asked if we were trick-or-treating. I told her we were, and she dropped a small comic book in my trick-or-treat bag and smiled. She seemed very kind and welcoming. The play started, and I got the weird feeling that something was off. The woman playing La Llorona pointed my brother and me out in the tiny audience and asked us what religion we are, to which my brother responded, "Roman Catholic." She then told us that La Llorona was also a Roman Catholic and was burning in hell for her sins and rejecting Jesus. She then told us that Halloween was an evil holiday and everybody who celebrated would burn forever. The play progressed to getting weirder and weirder and included a scene where La Llorona started talking about abortion and held up a fake fetus and pretended to eat it. My brother and I got up to leave, but the people stopped us and started yelling at us to sit down, but we kept going. They started following us down the street, and my brother grabbed my hand and started running because he was afraid they were going to harm us. We finally got to our street, and only about 3 people were still following us, yelling at us about how we were going to go to hell and we needed to accept Jesus. My brother and I went inside quickly, and he locked the front doors and then frantically ran around the house, making sure all doors and windows were locked, before he called our dad at his office. Our dad told us to call the police and that he'd be home in about 15 minutes. When my dad got home, the people were still outside chanting and singing some prayer song, asking God to save my brothers and my soul. My dad shooed them away and told them the police would be there any second. They were not deterred and stayed there chanting until the police showed up and threatened to arrest them. I was so freaked out by the events that I decided I didn't want to go to the party, and instead, Just wanted to organize my Halloween candy and put aside all the Snickers for my brother as a thank you for taking me trick-or-treating. Snickers were his favorite. My mom ordered pizza and we sat down to watch Halloween Town while I went through my trick-or-treat bag. I was halfway through sorting my candy when I came across the comic book that the lady had dropped in there. I opened it up and it truly horrified me. It was a propaganda comic about a little boy who went to a haunted house, ended up being hit by a car on the way home, and went to hell because he hadn't found Jesus. I was really scared, and for weeks as a child I had nightmares about the event and the comic book. Years later, I asked my mom if she remembered it, and she told me that she couldn't forget and that she and my father had called the police over it several times. Apparently, for years, the group would leave envelopes with mine and my brother's names written on them with different weird, creepy comic books and handwritten notes about how they were praying for us. Also invitations to join them in their church and weird promises about baking us cakes and other creepy ways to entice our child selves into their church. To this day, we can't figure out how they knew our names or who wrote the letters. It really creeps me out that they did this. I absolutely used to love Halloween. Not only dressing up as my favorite scary character, making horror-themed food, or putting up decorations. No, I loved the atmosphere that filled our neighborhood as it changed from its boring demeanor into something horrifying and exciting. My neighbor and best friend, Mark, was an even bigger fanatic than myself. Each year, he tried to make the best costume or scariest decoration, but despite our best efforts at becoming the Halloween Kings, we could never match up to Mr. Black. Mr. Black was a man of advancing age. He'd been widowed about a decade earlier, left behind by a vicious, evil wife that treated the entire neighborhood like crap. The only thing she ever loved was Halloween, and she'd make damn sure all the attention was directed at herself each year, on October 31st. When she died, I almost felt relieved for the poor man. Still, for reasons beyond my comprehension, he decided to keep his abusive wife's tradition alive. Each year, he'd come up with the most gruesome display of nightmare-inducing decoration. His entire house would be transformed into one of absolute mind-bending horror. He'd build a pool of blood in his garden, or he'd cover the entire house with cobwebs, unleashing a horde of spiders just to prove that he could. It was as beautiful as it was disgusting. How he constantly managed to outdo himself brought great joy to the rest of the neighborhood. Unfortunately, Mark couldn't stand it. He's a damn attention seeker. Always has to be in the spotlight. Every Halloween, he said. For years, Mark had tried to outdo Mr. Black. He'd spent thousands of dollars in preparation, planning for months ahead of time, only to be blown out of the water by Mr. Black. What was even weirder was that each time it would only take Mr. Black a day to set everything up, which enraged Mark beyond anything else in life. In 2017, Mark even resorted to renting animatronics that resembled crawling corpses. He littered his yard with the things, letting them scream and pull themselves around. He was so confident that year. And even as the 30th of October rolled around, Mr. Black still hadn't put up any decorations. When we went to work the next day on Halloween itself, Mark was beyond himself with joy. He'd finally done it, and he just wouldn't shut up about it. It wasn't until we got home later that day that we saw the horrors taking place in Mr. Black's front yard. In the span of 8 hours, he turned it into a literal graveyard. Muffled screams were coming up from the ground, with bells that were attached to strings, leading into buried coffins. They rang as people gathered around in awe of the sight. Those brave enough to traverse his yard were invited inside for a tour. Mark and I joined and quickly realized that Mark's pathetic animatronics were nothing in comparison. Because inside the living room, Mr. Black had created a makeshift morgue, full on with mortuary refrigerators that rumbled around as if people were trapped inside. Mark was pissed, to say the least. He couldn't believe it, and to be fair, neither could I. He swore then that he'd figured out how the heck Mr. Black managed to pull off these incredible feats, each and every year, at such an advancing age and without any help. How does he do it? Have you ever seen any trucks or workmen outside his house? Mark asked. I chuckled. Nah, but come on, he's retired. He probably gets it done while we're at work. Still, Mark didn't believe it. That guy's up to something. Next year, I'm going to stay at home and figure it out. A year passed, and Mark actually remained true to his word. On the 31st of October 2018, he called in to work sick. I sighed once I found out, surprised at how seriously he was taking it. Then at around noon, I got a frantic and excited voice message from Mark. I knew it. I freaking knew it. You won't believe what I just found. Mr. Black is a depraved monster. I'm going to call the voice message was cut short, so I tried to call back. No response. After the 5th or so missed call, I started to get worried. There is absolutely no way Mark would have given me any peace if he truly found something. But no matter how many times I tried to call him, I just got a busy signal. By the end of the workday, I was truly scared for him. Mark was never that silent. I needed to figure out what was going on. As soon as I returned home, I went over to Mark's place where I proceeded to hammer on his door. His wife was the one to answer, and she too seemed worried. "Police, is Mark here?" She frowned. "He went out to run some errands a few hours ago, but I haven't heard from him since. I thought maybe his phone died, but he should have been back home by now." Mark hadn't told her about his plan to investigate Mr. Black, mostly because she would have been mad. But I had to come clean. If he was truly missing, we needed to call the police. While Elise explained the situation to the cops, I went over to talk to Mr. Black myself. It was already getting late. Both children and adults had gathered in front of his house, ready for the yearly tour of horror. That year, his yard had been turned into a field of tall grass. It was so dense we could hardly see his front door. All we could see amid the field were makeshift scarecrows. Mr. Black hadn't let anything go to waste. As we entered his yard, the air filled with the stench of rotting flesh. It wasn't unusual for him to utilize all 5 senses, but this was extreme. "Mr. Black, you have a moment?" I asked. "In a minute, old friend. After the tour," he just shouted back as he led the people inside his home. I remained outside, disturbed by the odd smell. I moved some of the grass apart to inspect the scarecrows. They were horrifying, covered in old rags with bits and pieces of skin visible through the holes. They didn't even look like props. After a moment of hesitation, I reached out to pull off the scarecrow's mask. What I saw sent me falling to the ground in shock. That scarecrow wasn't a prop, nor a doll. It was an actual corpse. "Oh man," was all I managed to get out as I stared at the decomposing body. Once I'd partially regained my senses, I started checking the other scarecrows. Most of them were beyond rotten, skeletal corpses that had been perished long ago. But once I reached the last one, I immediately recognized the clothes. With a trembling hand, I reached to take off the mask. It was Mark. His throat had been slit, and he'd been turned into a flesh-filled scarecrow. I stood before the body of my former best friend in shock. All these years, Mr. Black had created what seemed like impossibly realistic decorations, but it had all been real. The blood, the cadavers, the screaming. We'd all been oblivious to it. The police arrived shortly after, alerted by Mark's wife. They quickly stormed the house and escorted all the guests outside, but Mr. Black himself was gone, and he was never seen again. I actually don't celebrate Halloween anymore, nor does anyone else in my neighborhood. For us, the 31st of October is just a painful memory of what we let happen under our noses. But if you see a new neighbor with decorations that seem just a tad too realistic, stay away from them. It might be Mr. Black. This is the perspective of my story told by me and in part by a friend. This happened to me the weekend of Halloween, and I personally don't like talking about it much, but I've been told by my friend to share it to get it off my chest. I and a friend were invited to a house party just for college students in the richer area of the town, so the house was huge with an acre of land and pool area. This party was themed to be a little naughty, so my friend dressed in a nurse outfit, and I dressed as a belly dancer. The majority of the party took place in the house, as there were maybe like 70 people, with the house being very spacious, so it was not too difficult to get around. I'm not much of a drinker, but I did have some juice that was available. Some friends pulled me and my friend over to take some pics, and I set my drink down. After what felt like an hour of just taking pictures, I found my cup and took another sip, not even worrying that I left my cup alone for a while. Then a man came up to me who looked to be in his late 20s or early 30s. He said my boyfriend's name and said that he's been trying to call me. That's when I realized I didn't have my phone on me. I have loads of respect for my boyfriend, so we always make sure to stay in contact with each other, and since he had to work, I promised I would contact him, but I just forgot. The man said it's urgent and said I can use his phone to call in one of the rooms. So not thinking at all, I followed the man. If my boyfriend really wanted to call me, then I knew it would be something terrible. As we entered the room, I felt as if I had just run a mile and felt winded. The man closed the door behind me and sat me on the bed and gave me his phone. I started to feel weaker. like I just got a migraine and couldn't call. Then I was helped to lie down, and within seconds I was out cold. I woke up later, not sure where I was or what even happened. I found my friend rubbing a napkin on my tummy while yelling. It took me a bit to come back to reality, and I realized I was in the bedroom with my friend cleaning some stuff off of me. That's when I had a panic attack and just realized that I quite possibly been assaulted. My friend calmed me down and told me that didn't happen. She explained that she couldn't find me anywhere and assumed I went to the bathroom. But after some minutes, I still didn't show, so she went looking for me. Eventually checking the bedrooms and finding me lying on the bed with a guy, something out of my belly button. Apparently, he was playing shots with my unconscious body by sucking alcohol out of my belly button and licking salt from my chest. She didn't know how long this went on for, but I immediately felt sick and even coughed up from just the thought. Thankfully, my boyfriend got off work early after my friend told him what happened. He picked me up while my friend asked around about the guy, but, of course, nobody knew of him or recognized him. I was taken to urgent care and looked at. Thankfully, nothing was wrong with me, and the drug in my drink didn't cause any further harm than just knocking me out. I wish the story ended here, but I started to receive texts from a random guy. First, he was just asking me random things, and I just didn't reply. But then he showed me a pic of my torso and started saying creepy things to me, and even giving me the impression he's stalking me. And this is still going on today. Just text me randomly. I've had the idea to try to bait him one of these days to finally have backup to catch him, but I don't know how smart he can be and what he will do to me if things don't go as planned.